The answer came in the spring of 2009, when I was approached by Elroy Smith, Moshe Loren, and Johnny Glover about joining 100.3 The Beat in Philadelphia. The folks there liked what I'd done on Wendy's show. It turned out they didn't even know that I'd had my own show in South Carolina and wanted to give me a shot. So in May of 2009, I launched Charlemagne the God in the Morning Beat. My show started off as stripped down as it could get. No producer, no co-host, no sidekick, just me and a board op. After a few weeks, I was allowed to hire a producer, so I reached out to my homie Sasha Katie, who had been at WBLS with me. She was young, smart, and ambitious, and I was able to convince her to come work with me in Philly. I was still living in Lyndhurst at the time, and Sasha lived in the North Jersey city of Elizabeth, so every day we would drive back and forth to Philly. It was about 80 minutes each way, and we made that commute for several months. For that reason and that reason alone, I will always be grateful to Sasha and be there for her when she needs me. She'd later join me on The Breakfast Club as an associate producer, where she worked for 5 years before recently landing at Apple. The Beat might not have given me a lot of resources, but I connected almost immediately with the Philly audience. After a few months, I was ranked number 3 with 18 to 34-year-olds, which was the demographic the station was catering to. It helped that I had a few interviews break nationally. These were the days when the internet and social media were just coming into their own, and people would jump all over an interview that had some action in it. One was with Cassie, a singer who didn't have much of a voice, but had been given a recording contract largely on the strength of her looks and the fact that she was dating Diddy. Cassie was a sweet girl who happened to come on my show during a very bad week for her. Her nude pics had just leaked, and she'd also delivered a terrible performance on BET's 106 & Park when that was the show that everyone watched. Being a man of the people, it was my duty to point these issues out. I had to tell her she was living in a Rihanna-Beyonce world, and there would never be a spot in it for her. Trust me, it was a very entertaining interview. It's on YouTube right now for your listening pleasure. Philly is also where the Donkey of the Day feature was born. I had been calling people donkeys since Wendy's show after I heard 50 Cent say, "Look at these donkeys, bunch of fucking jackasses," on a G-Unit mixtape. There was something about how he said it that made me think it was the funniest thing I'd ever heard. I started using the phrase, too, and by the time I got to Philly, I decided I needed to create a daily feature that gave folks the credit they deserved for being stupid. Donkey of the Day was born. Not everything I did on the air was ratchet. I did some righteous work, too. One day I received a call from Rashina Finnessy, the mother of a young girl named Asaya, who needed a liver transplant. Rashina felt she was getting the runaround from a hospital, so I let her come on and give the hospital's administration Donkey of the Day. It worked. Asaya got the transplant, and today she is a happy, healthy little girl. Sure, I could have gotten sued by that hospital, the same way I got sued by the nightclub back in Columbia, but I didn't care. I have no problem speaking up for what's right because I know that God will bless me for it in the long run. Philly was good to me, and I felt like I'd found a home. I was so confident Philly was going to be a long-term stop that Mook Mook and I decided the time was right to rent a townhouse in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, which is right across the Delaware River from Philly. The rent was more than we'd ever paid, but it would have cut my commute by more than half and allowed me to spend more time with the family. So it seemed like it would be money well spent. Then one morning, in October 2009, I woke up to find Twitter buzzing about a new Beanie Sigel song that dissed his former mentor, Jay-Z. Being that Beanie was from Philly, it seemed only right that I get him on the radio to explain himself. So I reached out to a mutual friend, and she arranged for Beanie to call into my show that very day. When I got Beanie on the air, he was very forthright about why he was upset with Jay. He claimed Jay distanced himself from the Philly rappers he signed to Rockefeller because they were Muslim and Jay's Jewish backers didn't like that affiliation. It was the type of conversation most radio hosts wouldn't touch without wearing surgical gloves. But being a man of the people, I felt I had no choice but to air the allegation if that's how Beanie felt. The interview went viral, and a reporter asked Jay-Z about what Beanie had told me that weekend. Jay responded with the quote, "Never has an artist done so much with so little," meaning that Beanie hadn't sold many albums in his career, but Jay had still managed to set him up with a clothing line, sneaker deal, and his own record label. As Jay saw it, he'd set his protege up to win, but Beanie, who'd had several run-ins with the law, just couldn't stay out of trouble long enough to take advantage of the opportunities. The Beanie interview originally aired on a Thursday, and I played it again during my shift on Friday. Thanks to Jay-Z's comments, it was also the top hip-hop story over that weekend. So, of course, we had to address it again during my show on Monday. I didn't anticipate any negative fallout, but after the shift was over, my program director, Boogie D, asked me to come into his office. I thought, if anything, he'd give me props for creating a national buzz, but instead, he chastised me for running the Beanie interview in the first place. Why would you want to make an enemy out of Jay, he asked. I'm not trying to make an enemy out of anyone, I explained. I'm just trying to put good content on the air. Obviously, there was no right answer for me to give, so he got to the point. Sorry, but we're moving in another direction. We're going to have to let you go. For those keeping score at home, that's Radio Industry 4, Charlemagne 0. I can't lie. The Philly firing caught me off guard. But as soon as those all too familiar words were out of Boogie's lips, I was already mentally moving on. I didn't argue the decision or beg for my job. Instead, I told Boogie, thank you for the opportunity, and walked with him to my office, where he had to make sure I didn't grab anything valuable on my way out. He had nothing to worry about. I just picked up my Wayne Dyer Power of Intention cards and headed toward the door. You ain't got anything else in here, Boogie asked? Nope, I replied, because I'm always prepared for situations like this. That remains a tradition of mine. I don't keep any personal items in my office because you just never know. As soon as I was out of the station, I jumped on Twitter to tell my audience what had gone down. I just got fired from 100.3 to Beat in Philly, I tweeted. Salute to Philly. I hope you all enjoyed me the past 6 months. I made the announcement myself because I didn't have anything to be ashamed of. I truly did not give a shit about getting fired because I knew I had done everything I was supposed to do while I was in Philly. I'd created great content, I'd used my platform to help people, and I'd conducted engaging interviews and asked the tough questions that it was my job to ask, no matter what the politics were. Whatever the reason they wanted to let me go, I knew it was only a temporary setback. The internet, however, wasn't ready to let things go so easily. Almost immediately, rumors began flying that I'd been canned because my interview with Beanie had pissed off Jay-Z. Did Jay-Z have Charlemagne the God fired? Asked the headline from XXL.com. While the YBF.com claimed, source confirms Charlemagne fired over Beanie Siegel interview. The story created so much buzz that I started trending on Twitter for the first time in my career. I might have been fired, but I was infamous. To this day, I still don't know if Jay was behind the move. Recently, New York Magazine ran a profile on me that mentioned the rumor. Jay read the story and then texted me to ask, yo, did I really get you fired? I don't think he was playing dumb. I've always found Jay to be one of the most down-to-earth and forthright dudes in the industry. If he had decided he wanted me fired, he would have let me know. I suspect it was a situation where Jay didn't push for it himself. Maybe someone on his label made a comment and the station ran with it. Or perhaps the station was moving proactively because they were worried about getting on Jay's bad side. No matter what really happened, I'm more than happy to have the greatest rapper alive got me fired on my resume. Having people think, rightly or wrongly, that your interview made Jay-Z pick up the phone is not a loss. Plus, since that moment, I've always told people I knew it would read well in a book. There's no better than adversity. Every defeat, every heartbreak, every loss contains its own seed, its own lesson on how to improve your performance the next time. Malcolm X. And just in case you think I'm looking back at the past through rose-colored glasses, consider this interview I did with my friend, the culture vulture DJ Vlad, literally the day after I got fired from Philly. Vlad, yesterday on Twitter, we got some shocking news that you actually yourself broke. Me. Yeah, I put out on Twitter that I got fired from the Beat in Philly. It wasn't nothing for me to break the news. My life is an open book. It's nothing for me to share something like that. On to the next one. I know what type of personality I have. I have politically incorrect views and potentially dangerous rhetoric. So when you're someone like me, there's always a chance you can get fired. Vlad, what's the next move? Me. Charlemagne's gonna do what Charlemagne does. You know, radio will be here in one hot second. There will be another station calling in one hot second. They didn't cut my tongue out. I didn't lose my voice. I'm still good. You still gonna hear from Charlemagne. You gotta roll the dice. With great risk comes great reward. Wendy told me some real shit once. When Puffy allegedly got her fired from Hot 97 back in the day, she told me that it was the best thing that ever happened to her brand. So history has a strange way of repeating itself, doesn't it? The confidence I projected while talking to Vlad wasn't fake, but firing number 4 was still the toughest for me to handle. Not because I was concerned about how it would impact my career, but again, because of how it might affect my family. As I said, Mook Mook and I had signed a lease on a townhouse in Cherry Hill near Philadelphia. In anticipation of the move, she'd given her job 2 weeks' notice and sent our daughter down to Monk's Corner to stay with our parents while we packed up our stuff. The day I was fired, I literally had all our possessions in my Cadillac Escalade to take to Cherry Hill. Thankfully, the owners of the townhouse gave us our deposit back and let us out of our lease, but that also meant we had nowhere to live. Instead of moving into our new townhouse, we headed to Mook Mook's grandmother's apartment in the housing projects in Coney Island, Brooklyn. We crashed there for 2 weeks while I tried to figure out what I was going to do next. Half the time I was determined to ride it out in New York until the next opportunity presented itself. The other half I was telling myself, I can't raise a child in New York. I'm not a city kid, and I don't want my daughter to be one either. Every day I'd see the pros and cons of each path. My mind was all over the place. Then one morning, I woke up next to my girl and had a moment of clarity. I knew that I couldn't make any smart decisions where I was at. I needed to make those decisions back where I was from. It was almost the inverse of those old Rakim lyrics. I needed to reconnect with my core before I could make the right decision about my future. And my core was Monk's Corner. Still, the idea of moving my family back into my mother's house at 30 years old was a bit worrisome. Then I had a very powerful conversation with my close friend, Kendra Gilliam, a.k.a. Kendra G, who was another jock on the beat in Philly. It was truly one of the best pep talks I ever received. Charlemagne, just enjoy your time in South Carolina, Kendra told me reassuringly. Hit the reset button, because you've been going hard for years, and you need this time with your family. And when the next opportunity comes, it's going to be a big one. And then family time is going to be hard to come by. Encouraged by her words, I jumped into my Escalade with over 200,000 miles on it. My girl got in her 2003 Honda Civic, and together we made the 13-hour ride back to South Carolina. I hadn't lived in the state in almost 4 years, but it wouldn't be long before I'd be reminded that in the eyes of some, I'd fallen off. I remember not long after coming home, I got into an argument with my little sister, Ashley. Look at you. You used to be with Wendy and had a radio show in Philly, she gloated. Now you back living at home with Mama. It was intended to be a low blow. But what she failed to mention is that while I was moving back in with our mother, my sister at that time had never even left. This is temporary for me, I reminded her, but it's permanent for you. I know that's a harsh thing to say to your sister, but I like to think those words had a positive impact on her as well, because after that, she did move out of my mama's house and is currently living in Atlanta with our sister. She's trying to better herself. There were more than a few folk in Monk's Corner who probably took perverse pleasure in my less than triumphant return. Still, I wasn't going to walk around hanging my head. Instead, I savored and enjoyed every moment with my family like Kendra told me to do. Unlike in New York, I had no problem walking into the Berkeley County Unemployment Office and picking up my checks. I hadn't collected anything the other times I'd been fired, so I ended up getting around $1,300 every 2 weeks. Not much to live off in New York, but in Monk's Corner, that's ballin'. Without having to worry about rent or childcare, we were actually able to save up a little bit of money. I used that to take occasional trips back to New York to stay relevant. I would make appearances on Angela Yee's SiriusXM show Lip Service, or tape episodes of Hood State of the Union, a web series I created with my good friend, the comedian Little Duval. Angela Yee played a major role in my life, even before The Breakfast Club. If Angela knew I had an issue with a certain artist and they were going to be on Lip Service, she'd give me the heads up and let me call in. One time, she let me go at the rapper Mims, and I destroyed him. It was great radio. Another time Angela called me, a gay dude named Glitter Dick put out a video saying he was my boyfriend. We had fun going at each other, and it turned into another great moment. Those moments kept me on the public's radar. Angela, Little Duval, and I also did a pilot for a hip-hop version of First Take. Terrence J was going to executive produce it, but BET never aired it. Terrence did tell me something I've always remembered, though. Y'all three should do a radio show. It rang true to me, so I, in turn, told Angela, one day you and I will do mornings on Power 105.1 in New York. I swear I said that verbatim. Angela was skeptical, though. How, she asked. You're not even on the radio, and I've only done satellite. Plus, they'll never fire Ed Lover, she said, referring to the radio legend who was Power's morning show host at the time. I don't know how it'll happen, I replied. I just know it's going to happen. Today, I believe I spoke our current situation into fruition during that conversation with Angela. I might not have been on the radio, but stations were still interested in me. Every few weeks, I got offered a new gig, but the market or the situation never felt quite right. I could tell the program directors were shocked when I tell them, no thanks. After all, I was living back in South Carolina and collecting unemployment. Who was I to be choosy? But I was supremely confident that God was about to give me something greater than what those stations could offer. The hand that feeds. Before we get to the next stop God had planned for me, I want to take a look at one final situation that on the surface seemed to be a loss, but on deeper inspection actually helped set up one of my biggest wins. When I became Wendy Williams' sidekick, I had two main goals. One, be the best I could be on her show, which I knew would set up the rest of my career. And two, put South Carolina's hip-hop scene on the map. As much as I love seeing the way the state had helped set up the careers of artists like T.I. and Jeezy, I also wanted to see local artists achieve the same level of success. To that end, in 2008, I hooked up with Lightyear EMI to put out a compilation called South Crack, featuring artists from Charleston, Columbia, and of course, Moncks Corner. The album didn't sell many copies, and since the deal called for me to pay for all the marketing, production, and publicity costs, I didn't make a dime off the project, but it did help create a buzz for several artists. In 2009, I met Swiss Beats at the video shoot for Mano's High Hater. I was blown away when Swiss told me he loved what I was doing on Wendy's show. He had made the beats for so many songs that have been the soundtrack to my life. I couldn't really believe he appreciated what I was doing on the radio. At the end of the conversation, Swiss told me, "Yo, if I can help with anything you got going on, let me know." I didn't have to think hard about taking Swiss up on his offer. If someone offers me an opportunity, they're not going to have to tell me twice. Well, I got this album I just put out, and I'm really trying to get one of these guys signed to a major, I quickly told Swiss, while handing him one of the copies I always kept on me for situations like that one. God, Jewel, when someone offers to help you, tell them exactly what you want. Don't beat around the bush. If you're not crystal clear about what your ask is, chances are you won't get anything. When I followed up with Swiss a week or so later to see what he thought, he told me he hadn't had a chance to listen yet, but added, "Just tell me the one artist you've got on there that's the most poppin', and I'll take you to whatever label you want to." It was an incredible offer. Having Swiss Beats walk you into the label of your choice is like getting a hip-hop version of Willy Wonka's Golden Ticket. I wanted to make the right choice, so I hit up DJ Frosty to ask his opinion, and without hesitation, he said, "Little Rue." A lot of people thought Rue had an energy like Mystical, so it was a smart choice. "Yo, I like this kid's tone," Swiss replied, after I sent him Rue's Nasty song. "Get him up here." Rue flew up and spent a few days in the studio with Swiss, where they collaborated on 4 tracks. Swiss was one of the hottest producers in the game, but he still blocked off time in his schedule for Rue. After they recorded those 4 songs, it was time for us to decide on a label. I wanted to go with Asylum, since they were having tremendous success with Southern artists like Mike Jones, Paul Wall, Boosie, Webby, Gucci Mane, Waka Flocka, OJ the Juice Man, and Shorty Low. Swiss agreed with me, so he set up a meeting with Joey I.E., the industry legend who was running the label at the time, and his right-hand man, Jay Grant. The meeting included myself, Little Rue, Swiss, Jonathan Stevens, who was Rue's manager at the time, and Kevin Hunter, who was acting as my business partner. After we played them the track Swiss had produced, Asylum was all in. Jay Grant's idea was to release Rue's album under Shoddy Records, an imprint he just set up, and everyone agreed that was a great look. The final deal was that 50% of the money would be split between my company, Stupid Dope Moves Incorporated, and Little Rue's company, Presidential, with the other 50% going to Shoddy Asylum. Swiss didn't even ask for a cut. Even though he'd made the music and set up the meeting, he was just happy to give a new artist a shot. On the way out of the meeting, Swiss pulled me aside and asked me a question I've always remembered. "Is Rue your man?" he asked. "Yeah, that's my guy," I replied. "Good," said Swiss, "but make sure all your business is straight anyway. I've done this 100 times, and trust me, once money gets involved, people tend to flip, whether they're your man or not." Before the paperwork was even done, we managed to get several important DJs to play Nasty Song. Probably the most important was DJ Envy, who was one of the hottest DJs in the country on New York City's Hot 97. Envy agreed to meet Kevin and me for lunch where we played him Nasty Song. Envy recognized Rue's talent right away and promised to play the song without asking for anything in return. I know we live in the payola age, but I promise you, neither Envy nor any of the other respectable DJs we approached asked for a cent. It was a hot tune, and they were happy to help out a new artist in an underrepresented region on the map. Due to the hype we created around Nasty Song, other labels began looking to sign Rue too. One day, Jonathan Rue called me out of the blue and said, "Charlamagne, we know we have a deal with Asylum, but we want to sign with Def Jam instead." "No, we already agreed to a deal with Asylum," I replied. "You don't want to mess with that. Trust me, it's the best look for you." Rue and Jonathan thought they could do better. Bless their hearts. Those guys are country. I was country too, but They were on another level, like match your car with your sneakers or get all your real teeth removed and replace them with Gold Country. And they'd been overly impressed by Def Jam's star power. Go on Def Jam's website, Rue told me. They got people like Jay-Z, Rihanna, Kanye, Jeezy, and Rick Ross. That's where I finna be. That's cool, I told Rue. But now go on their site and look at the other 60 artists that they've signed that you've never heard of. That's what's gonna happen to you if you sign with Def Jam. Rue still wasn't convinced. So I got him and Jonathan back on the phone with Jay Grand, who patiently went over the pros and cons of signing with Asylum. It seemed like he got through to them, and I figured the matter was resolved. The next week, I was listening to Hot 97, and Envy played Nasty Song. My dog, I texted Rue. Envy's got Nasty Song on Hot 97 right now. Fuck you. You got me fucked up, Rue texted me right back. It's on sight when I see you. You got people thinking we in business together, ruining my life. Now I can't even do the deal with Def Jam because of you. When I saw that text, I was devastated. I literally had to sit down and collect myself. Damn, all I did was help, I thought. I gave this kid the shot of a lifetime, and now it's fuck you? A few weeks later, Rue signed with Def Jam, and as Swiss had warned me, the paperwork became a nightmare. Though he never mentioned it to us, it turned out Rue had already signed a deal with a production company in Atlanta. I became convinced Rue was a contract whore, someone who would sign his name to anything without wanting to honor it down the road. Despite the complications, my attorney at the time, Jill Ramsey, negotiated a deal with Def Jam for $150,000. Little Rue got $80,000, then the company in Atlanta got $40,000. That left $30,000 for myself, DJ Frosty, and Kevin Hunter to split. So when it was all said and done, I only made $10,000 on the deal. Don't get me wrong, that was still the biggest check I'd ever received. Yet for some reason to this day, I hear Rue still tell people I stole $70,000 from him, which is complete bullshit. More so than the accusations and the money, what hurt me the most was the missed opportunity. The Def Jam album bombed. Only 1,400 people bought it its first week in stores, making it likely you've never heard of Rue until this book. I'm still convinced it would have been different if he'd kept his word and signed to Asylum. That misstep truly broke my heart. I used to get anxiety attacks just thinking about it, to the point where I had to go see a doctor. Putting South Carolina on the map meant that much to me, and I knew, correctly as it turned out, that it might be a long time before another opportunity that perfect came around again for another local artist. Oh, by the way, it still hasn't. Still, as with all my so-called losses, I took several lessons from this situation. The greatest was that you can never, even if the situation blows up in your face, hurt yourself by helping others. Swiss showed me that no matter how big you are, you can always help the next person. If they don't capitalize on your assistance, that's on them. But never let it affect your willingness to give of yourself. As Swiss told me, he saw the situation between Rue and myself play out hundreds of times before. He probably pulled my coat because he saw what was coming down the road. But it still didn't stop him from setting up that meeting or making those beats for Rue. That's just the type of individual Swiss is. The same with Envy. You know how many people ask him to play their record every day? Today we're partners on the biggest hip-hop radio show in the country, The Breakfast Club. But Envy didn't know me from Adam back then. He didn't have to help me. But Envy is a giver. So when you go on Instagram and see his big mansion, fleet of fancy cars, and most important, his beautiful family, know that's how he got to where he is today. Just like Swiss, they got all that through giving. Good givers are great getters. Russell Simmons. In life, there's no losses, even the ones that give you anxiety attacks. Only lessons. That's because you live and you learn. Principle 5. Put the weed in the bag. Success is a process. There are no cheat codes, no life hacks, no shortcuts, and no half steps. Opportunity always comes before money, but sadly, a lot of us don't recognize it unless there's a paycheck attached. Don't make that mistake. When you're just starting out, put yourself in the position to be a part of the process, and then get that money. Despite all the drama surrounding Rue signing with Def Jam, my relationship with Jay Grant and Joey I.E. remained strong. I stayed in touch with them throughout the rest of my run with Wendy, my time in Philly, and even after I went back to Moss Corner. I wasn't on the radio then and couldn't do anything for them, but they would always reply to my emails and welcome me into the Asylum offices when I was in town. I've never forgotten that. If you want to see a person's true character, watch how they treat people who seemingly can't help them. I've seen so many folks lose my number or stop returning my emails after I got fired. In the words of 50 Cent, these industry niggas ain't friends. They know how to pretend. Because Joey wasn't one of those fake industry guys, during one of my visits to New York, he linked me up with G-Spin, the legendary DJ who was then the music director at Power 105.1, as well as the DJ on Boston's Jammin' 94.5. A few weeks later, Kevin Hunter and I were able to get a meeting with him at Power to see if there would be any interest in me coming there. I thought the sit-down went well, but Power never followed up with anything firm. So I headed back to Mounts Corner and waited for the right opportunity to present itself. I knew I had the talent to succeed in New York, but the longer the phone didn't ring with any offer from a New York station, the more I started questioning my value. Had I overestimated my worth? Should I take a job in the Carolinas so I could at least start providing for my family again? Get back to being on the air? One night I decided to take a walk down the dirt road by my mom's house. As I breathed in the clean country air, I said a prayer like I always do, simply asking God for direction. After a few minutes, any worries or insecurities I had been experiencing faded from my thoughts. I felt completely at peace. And then out of nowhere, a voice commanded, "Go to New York on Monday. Go." I didn't have a reason to go, but there was no disobeying this command. If Saul had had his epiphany on the road to Damascus, then I'd had mine on the dirt road in Moncks Corner. If New York was where I wanted to be, then I had to stop waiting on an invitation and take myself to the action. God, Jewel, always follow your instincts, because your instincts are God's voice telling you what to do. And you better listen closely, because God doesn't repeat himself and God isn't loud. Whenever you hear that faint whisper in your head telling you what direction to move in, that's where you want to go. That Monday, I flew to New York and decided to pay a visit to Mike Kaiser of Atlantic Records. Mike is one of my all-time favorite people in the game. One of those guys who will always treat you right no matter what position you are in at a given moment. You might not have heard of Mike. You've probably seen him, though. When Jay-Z used to have courtside seats for the Nets, Mike was the tall, dark-skinned guy who looks like John Sally, always sitting next to Jay. But he's one of the most plugged-in people in the entire industry. He knows about almost every deal before it happens, and has helped shape more of them than the world will probably ever know. When I got to Mike's office, he quickly filled me in on some of the rumblings that were going on. "You know what Power is planning, right?" Mike asked me. "Nope, not really," I answered truthfully. Yes, I knew I was in the mix, but like I said, we'd been treading water for months. "They're talking about putting together a new morning show, and they've been kicking your name around," Mike said. "Word, that would be dope," I replied, knowing that if Mike was talking about it, it was probably more than just a rumor. Sure enough, not more than a day after talking to Mike, Power's program director, Cadillac Jack, hit me up and asked if I wanted to grab lunch. We went out and ended up talking for several hours. It was an amazing conversation, as much about life as about radio. As we headed back to the station, we randomly bumped into a woman named Tia, who used to be an intern on Wendy's show. "Oh my God, Charlamagne, it's so great to see you," she exclaimed upon seeing me. "When are you going to get back on the air? You were too good on Wendy's show. Radio needs you." It couldn't have been scripted any better. When Tia left, Caddy turned to me and said, "That just don't happen." I walk the streets all the time with jocks who are on the air, and nobody runs up to them with that sort of excitement. I don't know if there had been any hesitation on Caddy's part before that lunch, but I left feeling like there was no doubt I was going to be working at Power in some capacity. Sure enough, a few weeks later, my contract came through, and I found myself part of the station's all-new morning show, The Breakfast Club. It had been 13 years since I started as an unpaid intern at Jams back in Charleston, and now I was finally where I'd always wanted to be, co-hosting my own show in New York City. Spending a year in Mounts Corner waiting for the right opportunity had been hard, but in the end, it had proven to be the right choice. If I had been able to drop my own dream job, I couldn't have picked a better situation than The Breakfast Club. My co-hosts on the show were going to be my friends, DJ Envy and Angela Yee, who both had the perfect combination of experience and humility to succeed as co-hosts. Envy had been Miss Jones' co-host on New York's Hot 97, and Angela had been Cypher Sound's co-host on Shade 45. Add on that I was Wendy's co-host, and you end up with a team that knew how to play their positions. I knew that meant we wouldn't get sidetracked by the needless bickering that brings down a lot of shows. Plus, with iHeartMedia, we'd be working for the most powerful radio network in the country and have access to all their incredible talent and resources. It also meant I'd get to learn at the feet of two of the most influential people in radio, Doc Winters, iHeart's longtime head of urban radio, and iHeart CEO Bob Pittman. Most important, the show would give me a whole new level of exposure. Despite my stint with Wendy, Many folks across the country didn't have a real sense of who I was until I joined the Breakfast Club. It might have seemed like I was an overnight success, but you and I, faithful listener, know better. There were so many baby steps I had to take, so many setbacks I had to endure, and obstacles I had to overcome until I finally made the leap into the Breakfast Club. Too often, we're given bad advice on what it takes to get from where we are to where we want to be. We're taught that the only accurate sign that we're moving towards success is making money. We get caught up sweating the results instead of embracing the process, even though embracing the process is the only way you're ever going to get what you want out of life. There are a lot of gems in the iconic hip-hop flick Belly, but perhaps my favorite one is when DMX's character Tommy Bunn says, "Learn how to put the weed in the bag first, then get money." Let me put that quote in context. DMX was speaking to a couple of young hustlers, Wise and Lakid, who hadn't even sold their first nickel bag of weed yet, but were already talking about getting big-time coke money. Tommy Buns was telling them to slow down and focus on the work in front of them, no matter how small the job might seem, instead of immediately looking forward to the big scores. If they couldn't even put the weed in the bag first, how are they going to go out and become major players? Belly might have been detailing the drug game, but put the weed in the bag first applies to every industry and profession. Whether you want to be a DJ, a lawyer, an engineer, a doctor, a musician, or an investment banker. There are no cheat codes, no life hacks, or shortcuts to success. You have to embrace the process before you can reap the rewards. You're always going to have to put the weed in the bag first. Working for free. One of the first steps in embracing the process, especially when you're just starting out in your career, is accepting that you might have to work for damn near nothing, maybe even for free. I realize that might sound like strange advice to find in a book from a hip-hop personality. After all, get money is pretty much the coach's mantra. From songs to videos to interviews, almost every rapper or hip-hop personality you hear from is going to tell you, if it don't make dollars, it don't make sense. Not me. In fact, I'm here to tell you just the opposite. Often the smartest moves you make will be the ones that don't make you a pretty penny. At least at first. I believe the first rule of the game should always be, get your foot in the door by any means possible. If you demand a check, that door might only open a crack, if that. If you're willing to work for free, however, that door is going to open up, often wide enough for you to stride right in. Working for free is usually seen as something only rich kids can afford to do. You know those kids from fancy colleges who can take an unpaid internship at Vice or BuzzFeed because their parents are already paying the rent and giving them spending money? That might often be the case, but it doesn't mean that you need rich parents to work for free. Trust me, my pops didn't have any trust fund set up for me when I got my foot in the door with that unpaid internship at Jams. Throughout the whole process of trying to establish myself as a radio personality, I was always hurting for money. Sometimes were better than others, but I never felt comfortable. Even then, I never let wanting to get paid get in the way of a good opportunity. I was able to capitalize on the opportunity at Z93 Jams by hustling my ass off at all sorts of menial jobs. I would take any job during the day as it meant being able to hang out at the station at night. Later, when Jams was only paying me $19,000 a year, or when Hot in Columbia only put me on one day a week, I'd happily throw parties to make ends meet. The most important time I didn't let money, or the lack thereof, get in the way of a golden opportunity is when I agreed to work for Wendy for free. Yes, I am making money hand over fist today, but that's only because I didn't have my hand out when Kev made me that offer over dinner. When Kev casually threw in, "But we can't pay you," that would have been the end of the conversation for a lot of folks. They would have said, "You guys are making millions, but I'm supposed to work for free? Get the fuck out of here." And according to conventional wisdom, I should have said the same thing. It's not like I was a novice at that point. I'd been on the air for several years and was hosting my own successful show in Columbia. How are you going to tell someone who already has a track record of getting paid, even if it's only $10 an hour, that they should start working for free? Yet, I ended up spending a year and a half working for Wendy for free. I didn't earn a dime from the show during that period, but I don't feel like I wasted a single second. In my mind, I wasn't doing anything all those months but putting the weed in the bag. Without complaint. Every day I was bagging up my personality, my humor, and my POV, and delivering it to the listeners. Over time, the listeners, not to mention program directors, would smoke those proverbial bags and say, "Man, Charlemagne's got some good shit." I knew once they said that, I was set. The radio game is no different from the crack game. Once the streets knew my bags had that boom, I was on my way. What concerns me is how few kids nowadays seem to recognize opportunity if there isn't a paycheck attached to it. Not only do they want a check, but they often want ownership in what they're working on too. They'll hustle for a few months and immediately they want to start talking about equity. I think they've all watched the Facebook movie too many times when they should have been watching Belly. Equity. Even though you're 25 years old and you didn't put up any money? Equity. Man, shut the hell up and put some more of that weed into a bag. Can you imagine if after working Wendy's show for 6 months, I had come to Kev and told him I needed some equity in the show? Well, you know, Kev, I've been putting a lot of time into this show. It's really become a big part of my life. There's a lot of other stuff I haven't been working on because I'm so tied up in this. So I think it'd be fair if you gave me a sort of ownership stake. Man, Kev would have done me the way Uncle Phil used to do Jazzy Jeff on Fresh Prince. Thrown me right out of the building, and rightfully so. This is what many kids today fail to understand. You're supposed to be busting your ass for nothing when you're in your 20s, and sometimes even your 30s. That doesn't mean you're being exploited. It means you're building up the skills, connections, and reputation to eventually build a platform of your own. Once you build your own platform, that's when you'll get to equity. Remember, Mark Zuckerberg didn't get all that equity in Facebook just because he worked hard. Half the world is working hard. He got it because he was a once-in-a-lifetime talent who came up with a completely unique idea. Unless you've got that same sort of talent or have a truly unique idea, you don't own anything but your effort. Which is why I'll say it one more time. You better shut up and put the weed in the bag. Take advantage of internships. Speaking of working for free, never forget that a lot of successful players in hip-hop culture started as interns. Puffy started as Andre Harrell's intern at Uptown Records. Kevin Liles was Leo Cohen's intern at Def Jam. Angie Martinez started in radio as an intern at Hot 97 in New York City. Big Tigger got his first break as an intern at WPGC in D.C. It's no different outside of hip-hop. Xerox CEO Ursula Burns, the only female African-American CEO of a Fortune 500 company, got her start there as an intern. Steven Spielberg was an intern at Universal Studios. Steve Jobs got his first break as an intern at Hewlett-Packard. The list goes on and on. There's literally no limit on how far an internship can take you. Second, radio is one of the most intern-friendly industries out there. Even the smallest stations have interns year-round. In the 15 years I've been in radio, I've worked with hundreds of interns. One of my all-time favorites was a Haitian girl named Sasha, who used to intern with us at Power. Sasha's job was supposed to be helping us answer the phones, but she took it upon herself to start writing out questions for me whenever we had an interview. Not only did she come up with thoughtful and insightful questions, but she managed to write them in a voice that sounded exactly like my own. Once I told her how much she had my voice down, and she just humbly replied, "Yeah, I guess I've been listening to you a long time." Even after her internship ended, she'd still send me questions. She wasn't getting paid to do that or even getting school credit anymore, but she never stopped supporting me any way she could. She showed love because she was a friend, but she also saw the value of putting in the work in order to keep our professional relationship strong. I never forgot her support and kept an eye out for opportunities for her. One finally presented itself after I got a deal to do a late-night talk show for MTV called Charlemagne and Friends. When it was time to hire writers, I immediately thought of Sasha. She didn't have experience writing for TV, but I knew she could capture my voice. Plus, her work ethic was unmatched. So I hired her over several people who, on paper, were more qualified, all thanks to the initiative and hustle she showed as an intern. Another great intern we had at Power was a fat kid named Mac. He took his internship so seriously that he basically lived at the station. He'd start his day by prepping the morning show, go off to class for a couple hours, and then come back and look for ways to help out on the night shifts. A lot of times, he'd just crash on a dirty old futon in the jock lounge so he could already be at the studio when we got in the next day at 5 a.m. His work ethic was incredible, but we literally had to tell him to go home and bathe because he'd go for days on end without showering. We couldn't take him stinking up the studio anymore. My favorite Mac moment came during Hurricane Sandy. Everyone knew the storm was going to shut down New York, so the station booked Envy, Angela, and me into a hotel in Manhattan so we wouldn't have to travel into work. The streets were deserted. Nobody was on the roads, and the subways and buses were closed, as the mayor had banned all travel. But guess who popped up at the hotel anyway? Mac. "What the hell are you doing here?" we asked in disbelief when we saw him. "Well, y'all are here," he replied. "So I figured you might need some help." We were blown away. The station had plenty of paid employees who didn't even think about showing up that day. Who could blame them? But Mac the intern made sure he was there. That made a lasting impression on me. As Mac's internship was winding down, Cadillac decided to take a job in Boston and started filling out his new staff. I wanted to help Mac out, so I sent Caddy an email saying, "You should give Mac a job up there, man. Nothing's going to be opening up for him at Power anytime soon, and the kid deserves a shot. He put in the work." Caddy had seen it with his own eyes, so he hired Mac as his associate morning show producer in Boston. Mac hadn't even finished college yet, but he still found himself in a major market making good money. Again, all thanks to the initiative and hustle he demonstrated as an intern. I've also seen a lot of young people squander the opportunities that come with internships. If hard work is the best quality an intern can display, ambition is definitely one of the worst. That doesn't mean you can't be ambitious. Puffy, Kevin Liles, Steve Jobs, and Steven Spielberg were all incredibly motivated to win. But I guarantee their employers weren't too aware of that ambition when they were interning. They all knew how to keep that ambition in check until the time was right. In order to be a great intern, you must have blinders on and stay focused on the work that's in front of you, instead of the work you want to be doing down the road. This is because program directors, managers, producers, and supervisors don't care about your dreams. They're focused on their own. So don't waste their time making noise about what you want or what your master plan is. As Robert Greene says in 48 Laws of Power, conceal your intentions. Your only value to them is the work you put in. If you've handled your internship correctly when it's time to move on, your superior should come to you and say, "So what are you trying to do with your career?" And when you tell them, it should be their first time hearing your plans. We once had an intern at Power. Let's call him Pedro, who never learned this. He worked hard, but instead of hustling on behalf of the team, he always tried to bring attention to himself. Pedro even went so far as to make up business cards that had his picture on one half and a picture of myself, Envy, and Angela on the other. When rappers came to the studio, he would hand them one of those cards and introduce himself as part of the Breakfast Club. Doing that in plain sight of the show's actual producers was a ballsy move, but it wasn't worth the risk. The guests could tell he wasn't really a part of the team. If he was, why wasn't he in the studio? Why hadn't he been on the email thread that booked the interview? Why weren't any of the hosts talking to him? So it didn't get him anywhere with them. All it did was make us seriously question his judgment. Not surprisingly, we had to fire Pedro. He was replaced by another crop of interns, and we pretty much forgot about him. Nice kid, we'd say if his name came up, but too thirsty. Then recently, I got into a car service, and guess who was driving? That's right, Pedro. He immediately launched into this rap about how he was still producing, but also selling a little coke on the side to make ends meet. Man, this guy still does too much, I thought to myself as he yapped away in the front seat. Granted, I had some of the same tendencies when I was younger. When I joined Hot in Columbia, my partner DJ Frosty and I started calling ourselves the future. The implication was that the older hosts on the station represented the past. Just in case anybody missed the point, we even put out a mixtape called Disrespect Your Elders, where we dissed the older jocks on the station by name. At the time, I thought I was being edgy, but in retrospect, my ego and sense of entitlement were out of control. It's surprising the station took as long to fire me as it did. Nobody wants to deal with that sort of naked ambition from a kid who hasn't proven anything yet. I also showed too much ambition the first time I met Wendy. She was in Columbia for a market visit and was recording her show in our studio. I just put out another mixtape, this one called Hate Is Necessary, which featured her on the cover. After the show, I started pestering her to listen to some of the skits on the tape. At first, she just politely declined, but I didn't know when to fall back. I kept bugging and bugging her until finally she turned to me and in an icy voice said, "Please get the fuck out of here with all that mixtape shit." I couldn't care less. Take that nonsense to my husband. As soon as she said it, I knew I'd been doing too much too soon. It was an embarrassing moment, but it taught me the value of being cool when you're trying to establish yourself in a situation. But I did take her advice and took the mixtape to Kev, which in retrospect was the genesis of our relationship. Are there going to be people who will take advantage of your willingness to value opportunity over money, who might appear to be getting over on you? Absolutely. Who gives a fuck? As long as they're giving you a real opportunity and cracking open the door, even if that crack is thinner than Wiz Khalifa's arm, then you're the one who is getting over. I was recently talking about this with Joseph Kahn, the director of the movie Bodied, which I appear in. The film is set in the world of battle rappers, and there was one real-life rapper in particular whom Joseph really wanted in the film. He told me he offered the guy $70,000 to appear, but this rapper's mentality was, if they got $70,000, then they got $100,000. That's what I want. Joseph explained that $70,000 was all he had in his budget, but the rapper wouldn't move until he got that extra 30. Eventually, the movie studio got tired of trying to convince him and went with another rapper who was willing to do it for 50. It's too bad because the first guy lost an opportunity to show a movie audience just how great a battle rapper he is.